I'm not going to be neutral on an issue which I think would fundamentally undermine our economic future like it did for Quebec.
Jason Kenney's government has come out with a democratic reform package this week. Two major pieces of legislation that Jason Kenney calls historic. He says that this is the biggest change to democracy in Alberta since the province was founded in 1905. That's over a century ago. That's a lot of time. So this should mean a lot, especially because this is one of the main things that Jason Kenney campaigned on back just a few years ago when he was elected for his first term. I want to walk through these pieces of legislation with you. I reported on the first one, the Recall Act, and on the face of it, I was happy. I was happy that the Recall Act, something that conservatives in this province have been fighting for a very long time, was finally going to become a reality. But in diving deep on that bill and the next bill, the Citizen-Initiated Referendum Act, well, it turns out they're not as great as we thought that they were. They're not as great as many Albertans thought they were going to be. And I'm going to walk you through the legislation, and I want to hear from you what you think of what I'm saying here in the comments of this YouTube video. If you could just let me know what you think. I always read those comments, and it goes a long way to informing our reporting. Now, I want to share with you what I've read, what I've learned, researched, and what I've learned from speaking with Jason Kenney himself. He's actually been quite generous with his time with Rebel News recently, and I want to thank him for that. He's answered 4 of my questions just in the last week, which goes a long way to sharing the other side of the story, something that I think he actually wants to happen in Alberta. But I want to dive deep on Bill 51, the Citizen-Initiated Referendum Bill. This basically means that any citizen supposedly could have an issue that they care about, and they could petition Albertans. They sign the petition, and as long as they get 10% of eligible electors, which turns out to be about 250,000 if my math is right, then they can get any sort of package pushed towards the legislature so that it can be debated, and hopefully they can change government policy, legislation, whatever it may be. If it's a constitutional issue, it's an even higher bar, though. That means it would have to have 20% or basically 500,000 Albertans signing that petition. It's a really tough thing to do, and it's made even more tough by the fact that it has to be done in 90 days. From start to finish, you have to do this, gather 250,000 to 500,000 signatures in 90 days. If you think that's possible, well, good luck trying. I'm not sure that it is. It's a hard thing to get people to sign petitions. Pastor James Coates, who is in prison right now as I film this, we've had a petition going for him for weeks, and we've hit about 20,000, around that mark. It's been tough, and that was online. These petitions have to be in person. So, say you want to separate Alberta from Canada, you'd require 20% of eligible electors signing your petition, 500,000 people in 90 days. Is that possible? I'm not sure. But what is even worse than that is a poison pill line in this document, in this legislation that Jason Kenney's government wants to pass. And I'll read it to you. Section 5 of this act says, an application must not relate to a proposal that, in the opinion of the Chief Electoral Officer, a bureaucrat who reports to Jason Kenney, is the same or substantially similar to a proposal that, within the last 5 years, the Chief Electoral Officer has determined to be unsuccessful. So what does that mean? Well, I think a lot of people might read that as being, well, we don't want to be voting on the same issue province-wide every single year, every time that there's an election. We don't want to be voting on the same issue. If we vote something down or if we vote something in the affirmative, that should settle the issue. But that's not actually what it is. It means if someone fails to meet that very high bar, that 10% or 20% bar, even once, then that issue can't even be discussed for another 5 years. Basically, it means that all someone has to do to poison the idea of Alberta separation or whatever it is pay the registration fee, be the first one to do that, and then just sit on your hands. Hell, Jason Kenney could get his mom to do that. He could get his mom to file the petition and do nothing with it, and it would poison the idea of Alberta separation for 5 years. And someone could keep doing that every 5 years. They could keep doing that and ruin anyone's chances of passing anything substantial that anyone really disagrees with. It's a huge issue, and it really doesn't make sense why he would put a limit on people gathering petition signatures. This is a poison pill, and the same thing goes for the Recall Act. I asked Jason Kenney about the Recall Act just this week. I asked him what he would say about the former UCP MLA, Pat Rain, the MLA for Lesser Slave Lake. Would he support the recall petition for him? If he was to be recalled, would he support that? And that brings me to my point about Pat Rain. Well, what could he do to stop any sort of recall petition? Well, of course, when this law passes, the Recall Act, Bill 52, he could get his neighbor, his friend, his mom, his dad to submit this petition to recall the MLA for that constituency and then do nothing. And while that petition is sitting there in their hands and they're not collecting signatures, well, nobody can bring that petition back up again. It's a poison pill. And it means that this legislation is substantially flawed, if not just for the reason that getting 20% of Albertans to sign a document is already an astronomically high expectation when you limit it to that 90-day limitation. Now, I asked Jason Kenney not about this. I asked Jason Kenney about separation. Should somehow it pass through this process, would Jason Kenney remain neutral if a separation referendum was going to be passed in the province? Here's what he had to say.
Certainly, I would anticipate taking a position on referendum issues. Perhaps there might be some I'm neutral about. I'm not neutral about many issues, though, and I'm certainly not neutral, and nor am I. Do I ever run from the fact that I believe in a strong Alberta within a united Canada. That is, I believe, the position of the vast majority of Albertans. I agree that there is a minority that disagrees with that position, and they have every right to speak their minds. And at the end of the day, I would absolutely defend the future of this province within the Canadian Economic Union, and fight for it, fight for fairness, fight for equalization reform, fight for a fair deal. But I'm not going to be neutral on an issue which I think would fundamentally undermine our economic future, like it did for Quebec for so long.
Now, like I said earlier, I want to hear from you. Respond in the comments to this video. Do you think that this is Jason Kenney fulfilling his campaign promises, making it so that Albertans can recall deficient MLAs, making it so that Albertans can put serious questions to determine the future of Alberta on the ballot so that Albertans can vote on it and not just rely on their government to do that work for them? Sometimes they abdicate that responsibility. Jason Kenney has done it himself. Rachel Notley before him certainly did it, probably more than Jason Kenney. Does this fulfill that very basic promise and the expectation that Albertans have that they will be given more power in their democratic process? Let me know what you think in the comments. For Rebel News, I'm Keean Bexte. Hey, like I said, I really want to hear from you on this specific issue. Please respond in the comments and let me know what you think about Jason Kenney and these new bills that he's put in front of the legislature.